What's going on with the National Association of Realtors? What's going on in the Punta Gorda-Port Charlotte market? And a big announcement. I have a lot to cover today. I'm Adrienne, longtime Florida realtor, and I'm here to help you get your Florida life. Happy Wednesday, everyone. If you're new here, new videos come out every Wednesday. You can subscribe to follow along. Today we have a lot to cover, so I am going to go ahead and get started. I have an announcement to start off with. I am holding my very first webinar, and it's for first-time Florida home buyers. If this is not necessarily your first-time home buyer, but if it's your first home in Florida and you are getting to that point, maybe you've been dreaming of coming to Florida, of buying in Florida, and all of a sudden you're within maybe a year or two, or maybe even sooner, and you're thinking about taking a research trip down here, I am going to hold a webinar that's going to be April 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up for that in the description below. I'm going to go over things like what you can expect on your first trip down here, how to get the most out of that first trip down here, what to look for, and just some strategies. A lot of times I find people are on the internet looking up all this stuff. They have a million houses they want to look at, a million different cities and neighborhoods. So even if you're looking, I mean, this is very common, that somebody's looking from Sarasota to Cape Coral, or they're between Punta Gorda and St. Augustine, you don't have to be set on the Punta Gorda-Port Charlotte area for this webinar to help you. I have done this individually for hundreds of people, gotten them to get their Florida life. This will help you organize some of the information and how you can really get the most out of your first trip, or maybe it's your second or third trip, but get the most out of coming down here and looking for real estate, which is a lot different than coming down here and just going to the beach, or coming down here and just going to Disney World. We'll really focus on getting you to the point where you can feel comfortable buying something. So that's April 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Sign up for that below. Now we're going to talk about the National Association of Realtors. You may have seen it in the news lately. There have been plenty of lawsuits. I'm not going to talk that much about the lawsuits, only because, one, I'm not a lawyer. They get very complicated. None of them really happened in this area. But I am going to go over the changes, and you should know that a lot of this isn't being implemented till mid-July technically, but we are seeing realtors start to implement some of it. We'll go over it, and of course, as it gets closer, I'm going to make more videos about it. We'll talk about it a little bit in the webinar, but there will be some changes. The number one thing I think a buyer needs to know when they come down here is you are going to be asked to sign a buyer's broker agreement before a realtor shows you houses. Now, currently, this isn't set till mid-July. However, a lot of realtors, including myself, when we start with new customers, are starting to get these signed. And that is because a lot of people take months to actually purchase. When you start with somebody, usually that's the easiest time to just get this stuff out of the way. My biggest tip thus far for this is a new thing, so I have a lot of questions, and believe me, you will see videos on this in the future, I'm sure, at least for me, is before you sign anything, I would question what you're signing. I would make sure this is the person you want to work with. The agreement does, like a listing agreement, if you've ever listed a house, it is a relationship agreement. So you should know that you are entering into something with somebody. You should know the length of time and what the terms are and what the commission structure is and how that works. Speaking of commission, all these lawsuits have to do with commission. Commissions have, up until this point, well, continuing on through this point, are listed on the MLS. If the seller is offering a commission that is on the MLS, previously the lowest, well, this changed a few months ago, but maybe it was even longer ago. My sense of time is not great sometimes, but It used to be at some point that if you were a seller, you had to at least $1 in commission on the MLS that you would pay the buyer's agent. I don't know exactly when this changed, but it changed a while ago that you now can do $0. In mid-July, it is said that that is going to be taken off the MLS entirely. The one piece of advice I would give you on this when you watch the news and you hear all the chatter about what's going to happen is the same piece of real estate advice I would give you for so many things. Consider the source and consider the local market where you're buying or selling and what's going on in it. For instance, we are in a very strong buyer's market right now. There are other parts of the country that still talk about low inventory. Not something I'm going to talk about in this market update that's coming up in a minute. But if you're in an area, if you're selling in an area that is low inventory to buy down here, I think we're going to see a reaction to this change differently here than in a seller's market. And vice versa. If you're selling down here, your approach to selling when this comes off the MLS may be different than if you're moving out of here, the buyer's market, into a seller's market. Anything you hear, you always have to consider the market they're talking about, where, a lot of times these news outlets come from big cities and they're in just a different market than we are. We see different reactions to things. That's not just this lawsuit or this settlement. It's a lot of things. When I watch news on real estate, I think, well, that doesn't really apply to us half the time. Again, local knowledge is key when you are buying and selling. We'll talk more about that as it gets closer. We will always talk about local knowledge on this channel, but we will talk about how it's affecting us as it gets closer and as it is implemented. Currently, this is where you're going to really know that I'm not a lawyer. In case you didn't know before, not a lawyer. It's a proposed settlement now, and it needs to be signed off on by the judge in July, is how I understand it. If you're a lawyer and I got that wrong, feel free to tell me in the comments, because I get all my law knowledge from Law and Order SVU. All right, let's talk about the market, something I know a lot about. We're going to talk about supply and demand today. We are in March, going into April. This is when our season typically ends. We do typically see price decreases, but I want to talk about demand to start out with, because if you're looking in the inventory, it does look like no one is buying around here, but I might have some numbers to dispute that point. Let's look. Okay, we have here February. These are the closed sales chart from February 2021 till February 2024. In February 2024, we had 391 closed sales. Which, is that a lot or is it a little? It doesn't look like so much compared to way back in 2021. But if you go back to 2013, it is normal-ish, in the range to high for the years that are not 2021 and 2022, which we all know there was a global pandemic and it was mania. When you go back 2023, we're up from there. If you go back to 2020 and before, we are higher. Our demand here is still fairly good. Why is there so much inventory? Well, let's take a look. New listings in February of 2024 are 783. I don't even have to write all the numbers down. If you just look at that line where that little dot is, you can see we never get that close any other time to so many listings coming on all at once. In January, there was a little bit higher, but this goes back to February 2013, and we never get close to the 800 line at all. Now, of course, as I always say, the reason we care about any of this is to see what's going on with the sale price. If you look at February, we were at 389,945. I do these numbers on Monday before the Wednesday. On Monday, March 25th, our median for the first 25 days of March was 385. We're kind of level. I mean, a little bit down, but it's kind of a nudge. You can see we're still pretty up there as far as the median price. I do notice a lot of price drops on the MLS in this week, and that will probably continue through April. I'll talk about this later in the month more as we see it sort of pan out, how much the prices drop. But that is actually very typical this time of year because we are coming out of season. What will be interesting this year is we are coming out of season with so much inventory. Usually it's kind of like picked over inventory a little bit, but at this point, not really. It is a huge opportunity for buyers out there because sellers are in the reality zone of here we are coming into summer and our house hasn't sold. If you're a buyer who wants a little selection or you're picky or whatever, it can get tough in summer because there's not that much to look at. This year is different. There's a lot out there to look at. I know interest rates are high, but if you can get around that, it could be one of the better summers I've seen in a long time for buyers in our market. How long that will last, that is the big question. I will keep you updated. Don't forget to sign up for the webinar if you're interested in that. Thank you for watching. I will see you next week.